Welcome to Crusade Conversations, an interview series and resource for artists, curators, collectors, and people who care about the beautiful things in their world. I'm Jennifer Schwartz, your host and #1 crusader for art. I own a fine art photography gallery in Atlanta, the Jennifer Schwartz Gallery, and an online photo project called The 10. Crusade Conversations is an initiative of the Crusade for Collecting, a project born out of my passion for supporting art and artists. The Crusade's mission is to cultivate a new crop of art lovers, patrons, and collectors by encouraging people to engage with art in exciting and innovative ways. My guest today is Aline Smithson. She is an award-winning photographer. She's a former New York fashion editor and lives on the West Coast. She also is the editor and writer for the blog zine Lens Scratch. Hello.
Hello, Jennifer. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm excellent, too. Nice to have the summer off from lots of things.
Yeah, so it's interesting that you say that, because my first thing that I wanted to say about you is you are absolutely the hardest working person that I think that I know. I mean, the Lens Scratch blog, in addition to just being amazing and really almost just a really altruistic project, in that you're promoting all of these other photographers that you enjoy and respect, but you post every single day. How do you do that?
Well, actually, someone just interviewed me for the blog yesterday, so I had sort of put some thoughts together. I started it 5 years ago, like any other photographer, wanting to start a blog to showcase my own work. Mm-hmm. And, I didn't have very many followers. And after a few months, I really got tired of promoting myself and making my poor 15 readers have to say yay each time I post a new photo or wrote about something. So I looked at it as a real opportunity to learn about photography and photographers in a significant way. And as an educator, I really felt like that would be such a benefit also to my students. Mm-hmm. And so I just decided that if I was going to do it, I was going to commit to it and write every day. And it isn't easy. There are definite nights that I forget to write and then remember right as I'm about to go to bed and want to kill myself. But the benefits from doing it have just outweighed any of the hard work that it takes.
Well, and what do you think? First, how do you choose the photographers you're going to feature and what you're going to write about?
Well, I have a really strong feeling that there are a lot of photographers whose work doesn't get recognized because they're not coming out of an MFA program, or they're late to the party, or that they're someone who is working outside of the traditional photo realm. And I wanted to take those people, and then everyone, even people that had just graduated from college, high school students, but people that were making work that said something, that was well executed, specific, had a point of view, had something to say. And I really wanted to sort of level the playing field, because a lot of the photography blogs are, I won't say pretentious, but they don't include people that are kind of working outside sort of the groovy, up-and-coming norms.
Right.
And
so you feel like you have sort of a different mission with yours. You're trying to give...
I certainly want to see those people too, but I also want to celebrate people that are doing some great things that wouldn't normally be able to find an audience for it.
Right. And so what... how do you find, are you trolling the web? I know that you do a lot of portfolio reviews. Is it just something striking that you see?
I've been doing a lot of juring, so I usually find one or two people through that. Occasionally, I did open up for submissions, and what happened was that a lot of people submitted things to me that weren't ready for prime time. They really didn't have cohesive bodies of work or work that was at the level I was hoping to promote.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt that, and rather than have to send a disappointing email, I would rather just close the submissions and find the people on my own. And
right.
Occasionally someone will send me work, and if it's good, I will post it. But a lot of it is just, it's out in the ether. I come across something and I'm curious, but I try not to spend forever online.
Right.
So
it's a good
I have to
goal.
Step away, but usually I can find 5 or 6 people that I can run for the next week pretty easily.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to not contact the person. I used to just put the whole post together and then surprise them with it. But I decided that they needed to enjoy the possibility too. And so now I contact most of the photographers before I present their work.
I think in one interview I read that you wrote, "I don't want my photo journey to be a solo expedition. I want a band of merrymakers along with me," and the blog has provided that. And to me, I think one of, I want to talk in a minute, but you've had a really interesting entrance, I guess, into the photo world, and I feel like you've been able to achieve a lot and come at it from a lot of different angles. I think it's interesting that you are both a reviewer at Portfolio Reviews and also a participant photographer at Portfolio Reviews. And so I feel like you have a very much of a I'm one of you kind of approach. Like you said, it's not this, the blog isn't anything about you kind of dictating what the current trend should be. It's a really celebration of photography and photographers. And I think that so much of your success has been, you're just the nicest person, you're just, you put yourself out there in a way that's, the rising tide lifts all ships. You just want good for everyone. And I can relate to that. I think it's wonderful. So how do you feel that doing Lens Scratch has helped you, A, in your kind of photography career, but B, in your own practice, in making your own work? Do you feel that writing that every single day and kind of being out there looking at so much work all the time has informed what you're making?
I actually think I brought those skills to the party before I started, and I actually think, if anything, it's detrimental to my work. Because I don't think it's always healthy to look at so much work and then step away and then try to make your own work. But I do feel like I have a pretty unique point of view as a photographer.
Yep.
And that allows me not to be influenced by what I'm seeing. I get inspired, certainly. Mm-hmm. But and it has, for instance, I just took a short trip and did some landscape work, which I really haven't been doing, and definitely that was inspired by a lot of landscape work that I've featured. But for the most part, it's a two-edged sword. It definitely is draining, and people think of me as a writer or editor, and they don't think of me as a photographer. People don't realize that I'm a working photographer and an educator, and I write this blog at night. And, people think that I'm sitting writing this blog all day long.
Right. Well, it's the most visible thing that you do, to the general public.
So sometimes I think that is a detriment, that someone might not offer me an opportunity because they don't realize that I'm a photographer. So I now have completely lost my train of thought.
We were saying how's it helped your career? How's it helped your work, or hindered? But you've also had, I feel like you've really broken out maybe in the last year or two in terms of the cover of PDN, and it just seems to be in a really, really wonderful way kind of one thing after the next. I mean, do you feel that? Do you feel that momentum?
I think because you're in it and you're working hard, and I always say that making photography is like movie making. You make a great series, and then you have to turn around and make another great series, and so that you're always in a state of flux and insecurity. And to be perfectly honest, they never told me that I was getting the cover of PDN, and I was taking a workshop, and I happened to read my phone, and someone sent me a message and said, "Oh, we're featured in the new issue of PDN," because it was for workshop teachers, and they never told us for sure that we were going to get in that.
Yeah.
And then I went to the PDN website to read
Did
a
you
little
pass
blurb
out?
about me, and I saw my photo on the cover, and I was sitting in this dark classroom, and my first reaction was fear. And it was like, I'm going to be found out that I'm a total sham.
Oh, no.
I think it's really interesting psychologically how success, works for some people and works for others. And I know that it's fleeting and that you have to enjoy it, but there's, we're always kind of one step ahead of what happens because we create it, we send it out, and then we move on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
And then when it hits, we've already moved on kind of emotionally.
Sure.
So it's all amazing and wonderful, and I haven't really processed it.
Well, in terms of being a photographer and getting your own work out there, so the whole purpose of this this podcast series, this Crusade Conversations, is really talking to people who are taking things in their own hands and kind of making, in terms of the photographers that I'm interviewing, just making their own way and figuring out, based on their work, how to find their audience and how to get it out there. And when, in the few times that you and I have spoken about it, and you've said, and I've heard you give this advice to other people, it's just, hard work, really, really pushing it out and kind of trying to get as much exposure as you can. And how did you even start that process? I mean, I think a lot of people
really
feel overwhelmed trying to find it.
Sorry,
No.
I've just talked over you. It does boil down to portfolio reviews.
Mm-hmm.
As much pushback as I've read on Facebook from other photographers about the cost of attending a portfolio review, I have to say that all of those relationships,
mm-hmm.
whether something happens right away or not, or the person just becomes your friend or is a supporter of your work, it really does make a huge difference. And
Absolutely.
I see people that attend reviews on a regular basis, which I honestly don't recommend.
Right.
But, having lots of successes, and no one's going to come knocking at your door. So if you're going to go to a portfolio review and meet with a curator from Florida and you live in Los Angeles, well, that's a great thing. They never would have seen your work.
Absolutely. No, I completely agree. I tell people, it's an investment in your career. And
Absolutely.
I think you have to make sure that you're ready and you're at the right point for your work to be seen. But being able to meet with someone face to face and make a personal connection is invaluable. And as opposed to me getting, a disc of images in the mail, I think, and like you said too, there are a lot of times where I sit with someone whose work isn't the right fit for me, but I can think of 3 other people, in the industry whose work it would be a great fit for. And so It really extends beyond just the number of people you physically sit with, during the review process.
Exactly, yeah.
What do you, I was talking about how you've had a lot of success in the last year or two, and I wanted to bring up something that we talked about probably a little over a year ago. You had written a blog post about being frustrated with kind of the double-edged sword of having success as an emerging photographer and having the opportunity to show your work in a lot of different gallery shows, but you calculated how much money you had spent on the printing and framing and shipping of your work to be able to get out there in that way.
Right.
And I thought it was incredibly well written and thoughtful, and not I know that you were concerned that it came off kind of negative, and I didn't feel that way at all. I thought it was just really just important to talk about, and it was one of the main, I would say one of 2 or 3 things that really got me thinking about creating the 10, which is, for those who don't know, an online project that I do where on the 10th of the month, a single photographer is featured, and they have the opportunity to put up 10 images in an edition of 25 for sale for $250. And there's no cost to them to participate. And you were one of the photographers that we featured on the 10. And so I wanted to, that project was in a large part a response to what you had written, and it really impacted me because it is a really difficult situation. I mean, if you're a famous photographer and, you know, the gallery is courting you and paying those expenses, but when you're first starting out, it's just not that way. And as someone who has a gallery, I wish that I could cover those expenses, but it's not practical for me either. And so to give photographers an opportunity where they can get a lot of exposure for their work by having it featured online, but also have the potential to make money from that, from sales without having to pay for all of those expenses, was important to me. So do you tell me more kind of, how do you feel that putting that out there, and there was a lot of response to that. What was that like for you?
Well, first of all, let me say that, you know, you're one of the most creative curators and gallerists that I know, and I really appreciate you considering something like that and thinking outside the box. And, you know, I think in today's photography market, that's just a crucial way of thinking that's really important. And so I say bravo to you.
Thank you,
Jennifer, for all the things that you attempt and succeed at. And, you know, that's really what you just have to keep trying things and then see what works and what doesn't work.
Right.
But in regards to writing that post, I wasn't prepared for how much response it was getting, and I kind of just wanted to put a bag over my head and disappear for a while. But I got a lot of emails from people that did not want to post online, directors of photography organizations and other photographers that had figured out different ways of working. And,
oh, that's interesting.
You know, when I first started out, this was pre-digital, and as I said in that post, that every gallery had a set of frames. They usually were 20 by 24, and so you printed 16 by 20 prints, you matted them, and you sent your mats to the gallery. They placed them in the frames and sent them back to you, and they usually paid the shipping of the mats, and they usually paid to fly you in for the opening. Well, then
those were good times.
And everyone wanted to have a different sized print,
right. And the economy made it,
and everything changed so that in order for a gallery to stay afloat, the photographer had to assume a lot of the financial burden of the prints. And that my dilemma was that for instance, 1 month I got into 8 shows, and the cost of printing and framing and shipping all of that work was just astonishing and really stunning to me. And I wanted to talk about it, to just explain how this feels. And I think that people now are like using that in college classes to kind of prepare people for what's coming.
And I think it's important too, And I think a lot of people, maybe it gave them an opportunity to step back and think about what they were doing. I think it's kind of, you have sort of this compulsion to submit to everything and try to get as many things as you can in a really full CV, and to feel like that you're getting traction, like things are happening. And in reality, I mean, it's expensive, and it's and is it going to be worth it to have one piece in a show of 50 different pieces? Well, maybe, I guess it depends.
Yeah,
I think you have to figure out where you are.
To things that have really, that jurors that might, be good people to see your work.
Right.
And, when I juror an exhibition, I always feel like at least there's the possibility I'll feature them on Lens Scratch, or there's something that I can do for people, that a way to give back for them, submitting to an exhibition.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a lot of conversation about that too, the fees to submit to things, and that is it just to make money? And, it definitely is a way for a gallery.
I think there's several galleries that pretty much make their whole income from having these exhibitions, and honestly, I don't see anything wrong with it, because no one is forcing someone to submit their work.
Absolutely. And I do feel that in some cases, depending on where you are with your career, who the juror is, there's a lot of value to doing that. I mean, as you know, all of the people that do the portfolio reviews and then end up being jurors for these different things, there's a community there, and we flip names to each other, oh, I just juried this and I saw this work and I thought it might be a good fit for you, or I just had an open call for the 10 where I was supposed to choose one person to be featured and I couldn't decide. There's a lot of great work, and I chose 2, and there'll probably be 3 or 4 other people that submitted that will also be featured. And it's, for me, it's a great way to see new work, but I also do see the pitfalls, and I think that as a photographer, it's just really important to be thoughtful, to have a plan, to really think about what your work is, and if that's the right fit, and if it's the right time even to show your work. I think there's a lot of value of waiting until your project is finished or really well rounded out before you start doing the review circuit and before you start submitting to everything, because the worst thing that can happen is that people are sick of it before it's even finished. Mm-hmm. And then you're really not giving it a chance.
I completely agree. But I think when people start out, especially people that are coming not out of academia, mm-hmm. they kind of are searching for some kind of validity, because they don't really have a community. So right. Getting into a variety of shows early on, maybe the first 3 years, is really, it kind of buoys your spirit and keeps you going.
Right.
But at some point you do have to step back and say, okay, I have a pretty good resume, what's next?
Right.
And 1 year I submitted to absolutely nothing that would hang on a wall, but I only submitted to magazines. And that was really fantastic, because when you get the cover of a magazine or in a magazine, you're getting seen by thousands of people, where a gallery show brings in 200 or 300.
Right.
So
absolutely. If you're lucky.
You kind of pick and choose the avenues that you, the ways that you market yourself. And there are so many now. There are so many more than when I started. It's just mind-boggling.
It is mind-boggling. I think that's kind of the other side of it, is that it can be really, really overwhelming, and the social media, and to stay. It's a balancing act. You want to stay top of mind without being overly saturating yourself,
right.
without kind of being...
There's definitely photographers that I have lost interest in because they over-promote themselves.
Right. And then, or maybe they're promoting at a time when it's not really appropriate. And so when they do have something that would be a more appropriate time, a project is finished or they just got featured, your eyes glaze over when you see their name. So again, I think, and back to what you were saying about the first few years submitting and being in a lot of group shows. I mean, the photographers that I work with, both at the gallery and that I consult with, I really do recommend, okay, if you are filling up your resume and you have a good bit of that, now it's time to be more selective, to really only submit when the juror is someone that you think your work is a good fit for and you want to get in front of, or it's a show and they're only selecting 3 or 4 people, and you'll have multiple pieces, things that carry more weight, to be selected.
Right. Yeah, that's great advice.
It's a lot to keep up with. I mean, most people don't know that I do my own fine artwork, and I have no interest in, it's overwhelming. And I also feel like it's, when someone sits down and shows me their work, I admire that so much. I mean, it's your art and it's so much a part of you and it's what you live, and to really just sit down and expose yourself in that way and to be that vulnerable to show someone what you have created, and to be able to speak about it in a way that is really strong and makes sense. I mean, I think we can all think about our art in our own heads and it makes sense, but then to try to translate that into either a written statement or the elevator pitch is it can be so overwhelming and so impossible. And so I really admire people that are able to do that, to kind of put themselves out there, and you have to believe in yourself to be able to do that, to be able to go to a 4-day portfolio review and sit down and listen and hope that it's good, but also be willing, and ready to accept that the feedback you get might not be what you want to hear. Right. So good on you.
That's how you grow and learn, and it's, I think by the time you go to a portfolio review, you should be less fragile, and you should really be able to articulate why you're making the work you're making.
Absolutely.
And that's a huge part of it.
Absolutely. I just wrote a big thing about writing artist statements, and I know that all the time I hear people complaining about it, mostly photographers that need to write one, that, why do we need a written thing? We're visual artists. But I think in addition to needing it to submit to certain things, and I think it helps clarify your concept to a new viewer, but it also helps you practice talking about it. I mean, to write down in an organized way your thoughts and your feelings and your motivation and your inspiration and your concept can only help you when you're speaking about the work. I think we all, in some cases you say, oh, I can talk about my work, I made it. But when it comes down to it, are you really giving it its due with the words that you're using? And I think writing can only help that.
Absolutely.
But it can be torture. I get that too.
Well, that's the one good thing Lens Scratch has done. It's made me a much more adept writer. It's just like any skill that you do every day.
Right.
It's really helped me in my writing for other things, so that's good.
We have just another minute or two. Is there anything else you would like to put out there?
Well, I think really what I have learned as a teacher and as a photographer is that truly your best work comes from something within you, within your past, within your life, something right in front of you that you haven't explored, and for me, that's the kind of work that I love to look at, that really resonates with the photographer, but it's also a universal subject that we all can understand and share in, whether it's a sad story or a childhood story or something in daily life. But I just don't think we always need to get in an airplane to make great work.
Absolutely.
My goal is to never to leave the house. So that's that's why I shoot paper dolls.
Well, it's working for you, so congratulations. Well, thank you so much for being my honored guest.
Oh, thank you. It's really fun talking to you.
Absolutely.
I wish everyone out in the radio world good luck with everything.